Welcome to the Seekers and Finders 2024 podcast. Today we have the pleasure of hosting Robert Potter and Marianne Tebbens. Robert is the author of Letters from 500, a visionary work that explores humanity's potential from a future perspective. Marianne Tebbens is a psychotherapist and artist who brings her unique insights into the human experience. Recently, she has embraced the concept of non-duality, which has brought her a profound sense of wholeness and curiosity, opening new chapters in her lifelong journey of self-discovery. Together, Robert and Marianne will share their insights on the nature of reality, the journey to oneness, and the power of embracing both the known and the unknown in our quest for deeper meaning. Tune in for an inspiring conversation that promises to ignite your imagination. Today we have Robert Potter and Marianne Tebbens. They're both friends of mine from the Philadelphia area, and we're going to continue our conversation about non-duality because Marianne, after she heard Jerry Katz's podcast, finding it very interesting and then questioning herself about the role of duality in her own life. And she is a psychotherapist and she does art therapy. She's also an artist. She'll talk about that, but she said some very interesting things in an email, which I'll bring up when they come on. But the other thing is that I wanted to mention to you that I've been looking at different podcasts about non-duality, and there's tons of them on YouTube, of course, right? So I guess it's just the label that kind of doesn't jive with me, because it sounds like the concept of oneness, where we are just part of the oneness of the manifestation of consciousness. And, you know, it takes the form of separation here, but for me, through meditation and through study, I can reach that place in my mind of oneness, and then my being becomes part of that oneness. But of course, you know, the mind turns it into a concept, and you work towards that concept. I mean, that presence, which is something we'll talk with Robert Potter about, who Robert Potter is a dear friend. He's an author, a documentary filmmaker, and you know, he wrote the books Letters from 500, which he'll explain. But in the books, he talks about presence as well, being present, being, you know, authentic, not resisting. So it's something I want to bring up with him. But Eckhart Tolle also talks about non-resistance and being present. And it seems to be the same thing that non-duality is. And I know you have your own, I don't know if you have a definition for it. You live it.
Yes, it's all about presence. It's all about just this right here, right now. What is it? And so one way, there's no need to label it because it's beyond. It can't be captured conceptually. That's a non-starter. But one good word, the one that appeals to me at least, is presence. What's here right now? Presence, or presence awareness. And so that's what it's all about. It's basically to be present to that unchanging, never not here presence. So that's why I would sum it up.
So this also goes back to the yogic form of Advaita Vedanta.
Right.
And that means
words,
not two.
Not two. So okay. It's not ad, not vita. No division. It's just one seamless, boundless, not coming, not going, I like consciousness. Some people have a problem with that word. I don't, but some people say, no, there is no. Well, you know, we can get into all kinds of stuff with depending on what definition you're using.
Is it
Like, in other
because
words,
is it because it's an active word rather than a passive word? It seems that non-duality is more passive than it is active.
right. And actually, you know, active passive kind of doesn't apply really, but yeah, because it sounds like a thing. Oh, there is something called in other words, whereas the non-dual teacher will say, no, it's not a thing. It's not a thing. It's not anything. It's that which is maybe perceiving things, but it's not a thing in itself.
Do you think all these teachers really understand what they're talking about?
Some of them do. The ones I like, the reason why I like them is because they impress me as they know whereof they speak. You know, like I like to. There's a story in the Bible, right, about Jesus, and they said one of the things they said about Jesus was uh, he speaks not like the scribes, you know, but one who knows from direct. Like the scribes, like would be in our day, the scholars, the theoreticians, the academics. They have all this stuff in their mind, and they can quote it. They can tell anything you want. But when you meet somebody who speaks with authority, what's the authority? The authority is one's own experience and speaks directly. So the teachers I like are the ones who speak directly from their own experience, and they have that energy or vibration, or whatever you want to call it, that they are speaking. They know whereof they speak. It's not just because they read some book or they have some idea in their head. That makes all the difference. So those teachers I like. I don't care about the other ones because there are so many of them.
So they're living the experience.
They are the experience. There's no two things. They are it. It's like goes all the way back to the Upanishads, the famous Mahavakya, Tat Vamasi. Thou art that. You are it. It's not like you're using it or you're getting it. You are it. That's what it's all about. Realizing that you are it, and it's not something that you have or you can use or you can do something with. That's not it.
Okay, we want to welcome these lovely people, friends of mine from the Philadelphia area. I'm so excited to have them on the show. And let me just introduce Marianne Tebbens and Robert Potter to Seekers and Finders 2024 podcast. Hello. Welcome to the non-dual state of duality. Actually, it's quadality because it's the four of us.
The 4-in-1.
The four-in-one.
The holy quaternity.
All right. We're actually going to start out with your query on the email that you sent, Marianne. And I'm going to just put out what you sent to me after you watched Jerry Katz's video. And then we can start from there. And you said, I can't grasp the idea of duality. I love this dialogue you three guys had. I felt so isolated every time I end up challenging Robert about my resistance towards duality. We were wondering, I asked you this, we were wondering, as you are a psychotherapist, how could you not grasp the idea of duality? So let's start there, and this should be good.
Well, okay, so the talk that you gave was the first time I'd really gotten into this thinking of duality, non-duality. I knew that I didn't feel comfortable with the idea of duality, but I never thought of another way of thinking about it. And then Jerry Katz opened my eyes, and I was like, oh, that's what I've been comfortable with all my life and didn't even know it. And then I responded to that. As a therapist, when I first started treatment, I was taught how to use techniques. There were ways of being a therapist, ways of listening. And I soon found that that wasn't authentic for me, that I wanted a different experience with my clients. And as I matured as a therapist, I learned to listen in the session in a different way. I learned to hear body, mind, spirit, I learned to get out of my own way, out of my ego, out of technique, and be so present to the client that I was downloading stuff that they needed to hear, and was shocked at myself sometimes at what I said. I mean, I'd actually be surprised at what seemed to come through, and they would be, oh my God, that's so right. That you just hit the nail on the head, because I was out of the way. I don't know if that explains part of what you want to hear or you're looking for. Ask me more questions, but maturity really helped me get to that new place as a therapist. And so I could let go of rules, I could let go of techniques, I could just be completely present. And the person felt so much more connected to, and healing started to flow to them.
So you've actually broken a barrier here in the place where a therapist and a patient are divided in the need for a response from somebody, where you've actually become one inside the client's vision, and you're able to express it almost as though you're living inside of them, and you're feeling that oneness more than just as a therapist being academic about answering questions. Am I kind of putting it?
Wasn't academic, and I knew that because I could feel my whole body, sometimes even filling up, getting teary, not crying, but feeling that joy tear. You know, when you feel joy and teary, and you know you've like gotten something from the universe that didn't come from your ego, that didn't come from your way of thinking.
So you mentioned in the email that Robert challenges you, and Robert, going over my favorite part of the early letters books, the 3 suggestions and the 3 more suggestions, it talks about noticing, not resisting, and presence and authenticity in a nutshell. And it seems that that is non-duality. Now, where is the challenge here with what Marianne is discussing with you?
From my perspective, it seems that that the discussion of duality came through the material I was writing, and I had no intention of setting up duality as a particular focus. It was just one of the elements that my guide would use to describe the difference between the soul state and incarnation. So often she or he / he would refer to duality, but it wasn't to set it up as a model. It was more like to set it up as a veil that we had to work with and try to see through. And but I think, I just took it for granted. But Marianne all the time was noticing it apparently and had difficulty processing it. And I didn't catch on to that for a long time.
So basically, Marianne
Right.
was the seeker and you were the finder. I mean,
Well, I didn't even challenge it for a long time because it was like, oh, okay. I respect that someone sees something a certain way, but didn't have a clear enough alternative, or didn't argue it because I didn't like arguing. That's a duality, right or wrong, left, right, good, bad, whatever. But whenever he would say something in our discussions that had this split, even talking about the human body, the right side, the left side, the right brain, left brain, I would go, doesn't feel right to me. I didn't like everything packaged in duality terms. It was too neat, too glib.
So it may have been the case that Robert was the seeker and Marianne was the finder, as opposed to Stefan's prior model.
Entirely possible. But I still think that duality is something that we need to recognize in this world and deal with, even to the point of saying ego on one hand and soul on the other, or spirit. It just seems to me like it's one of the things we have to work through and resolve while we're on our way to oneness. And that's as far as I really have much care about it. It's just one of those things we have to deal with.
You're separating soul and ego?
I don't think it's not my place to separate it. I just feel like we have an ego and we have a soul. And I don't think it's separate. I think it's all one. Yet the ego wants to separate for sure.
We were talking about the differentiation between the soul and the ego and the part it plays in non-duality, if it does play a part at all. I guess people that are, into the non-duality state of being don't see it as two things. They see it as one thing, yet we deal with it every day. The point is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Isn't it that the ego, like in therapy, wherever people come pained, the ego is what we're trying to challenge, to have be quieter, be less of, so that the soul can know itself better and expand its consciousness. I think we're evolving, and it was very primitive, Freud with ego, etc. We've developed so much more. I went through psychoanalysis at like 18 years old up in Harvard Square, and it was, all very different than therapy is now. So we're trying to get to more consciousness, which means ego goes down, soul goes up in my mind. And I think that consciousness that we're evolving, but we're taking a long time, and a lot of people are not more conscious, and they're really stuck in their ego, and they don't want to look at the defenses, at how they're protecting the ego, how they're focused on the ego, building the ego. I mean, most of the world is probably still ego oriented, but lots of us are seekers.
Well, how would you describe that? Would you think that reflects duality, that people are stuck in their egos?
No, I think well, I don't know how it would be. I'm seeing it as all one growth toward evolution and consciousness. It's expanding the self and diminishing the ego. I don't judge it as two things. It's huge.
Well, how do you count? How do you count anything? 1,
Count.
2, 3, 4. To me, that's just basic duality. If we count something like one soul, two souls, one ego, two egos, that's duality.
I don't see that.
So you don't see counting as anything that is mechanically dual.
I see it as a tool.
A tool.
Yeah, a tool to make life more practical.
Okay.
All right, hold on 1 second.
Okay.
This is great. I love this. And Gary can either back me up on this or defer to something else. It seems that non-duality is an expression that everything is part of the one. So there's no division in someone who is being in a non-duality state of being. They don't see it. Now, I mean, I'm curious to know people that claim that they live in a state of non-duality. What happens when they get angry at someone? What happens when they have some kind of an emotional upset that takes them out of that? And do they think that non-duality takes on all of those things, all those emotions, and it doesn't matter. It's just a part of all of non-duality, so they can be angry. I mean, that's not a state of high enlightenment. The state that O talks about in Letters from 500 is a much more balanced, almost Buddha type kind of consciousness, where the emotions have come to a point where they're understood and not used as a force.
If I was to look at the anger piece, I would say that a more conscious person, everyone has anger. You have your anger, and then you are aware. Maybe it comes through your body first, but you're aware that you're angry. You take the space to decide how you're going to manage that anger. That's maturity, that's consciousness. And then you make the step to resolve it within yourself. Like, do I want to express something to the person I'm angry at? Do I want to let this go? Is this my own projection? Is this about, me and an issue from my past? What is this about? So it's still part of the wholeness.
I think Marianne has hit the nail on the head. And I think let's just take the one issue because it came up, anger. Okay, so I think Marianne has it down perfectly in that, of course, anger is part of it because there's only one thing. There are not two things. Anger appears like everything else, like bliss and this and that and boredom, whatever. There is nothing excluded from the non-dual state because remember, there's only one thing in which everything appears. However, it's also part of non-duality to recognize I'm angry. Okay, now do I act out? Do I act it out? No, I would say I wouldn't, because I wouldn't think it would be appropriate. It's all part of it. You don't leave. In other words, another thing I wanted to make clear is that it's not like, oh, you fall out of non-duality because you get angry or anything. You cannot. How can you leave non-duality when there's only one thing going on? But everything happens within it. It's like the ocean and the waves. There's only the ocean, yet all kinds of waves pop up and recede. Everything comes and goes. It's the recognition of this that's where the balance comes in and the peace and the thing. So I get angry, but I'm not going to express it on some other creature who in reality I am one with. So, and I think Marianne hits another key word, maturity. It's not just something silly like, oh, well, it's okay to be angry and kill somebody or rob a bank because it's all one. That's silliness. But when a person, and it is about, I believe, the evolution of consciousness to where, well, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling this, but I'm not going to act in a way that's going to harm somebody else, even though from one point of view there are no others. Okay, But within the Leela or within the play, of course there are others, and of course we have to be concerned with that. So anyway,
you'd be harming yourself if you went to harm other.
Exactly.
Your anger, you'd in some way harm yourself. Certainly.
Exactly.
Gary, could you describe the play of Leela? What does that really mean?
It means, okay, Leela simply means the play, it's a term from Hinduism. It's the cosmic play. In other words, there's only one thing going on. It's like there's a stage and there are many actors, right? But they're not separate individuals with free will and agency. No, they're just playing their roles, like the waves in the ocean. They're playing their roles, so back and forth. So there has to be some drama, or otherwise there's no play. There has to be maybe some conflict and some resolution. Otherwise there's no play. So it's just the play of consciousness. That's all. Appearing, one consciousness, appearing as many actors, appearing as everything, but there's still only one thing to go back to that phrase, there's still only one thing going on, which is consciousness playing all the roles.
Okay. Kind of like what we're doing right now.
Exactly. It's exactly what we're doing right now. I have a point of view. Stefan has a point of view. Marianne and Robert have points of view, and we're at play. We're seeing how they interact and come and go, and they can clash. There's nothing wrong with that. Nobody is going to hit anybody over the head with anything, but that would be inappropriate. But what I'm saying is, it's okay to explore these things.
Okay, so I just want to bring this up. You all know that I have been referring to ChatGPT for a lot of things. And I went on today and I asked it how Letters from 500 and non-duality, do they have anything in common? So that this was the response. And this is the first time I know you're hearing this, Robert. Yes, Letters from 500 by Robert Potter shares themes that closely align with the concept of non-duality, even if it doesn't use the term explicitly. In the series, the writings explore ideas of transcendence, consciousness, and the dissolution of the ego, all of which resonate with non-dual philosophy. Non-duality refers to the idea that there is no separation between the individual self and the universe, between subject and object, or between the observer and the observed. This is a key aspect of many spiritual traditions, such as Advaita, Vedanta, Zen Buddhism, and Taoism, and it emphasizes unity, wholeness, and the oneness of all existence. In the Letters from 500, the focus is often on moving beyond the ego-driven self, a central tenet in the non-dual thought. Potter writes about a future world where humanity has evolved into a state of higher consciousness, leaving behind the dualistic, fear-based nature of ego. The messages in the letters point towards an awakening to a more integrated and holistic way of being, where distinctions like me and the other dissolve into a unified awareness, similar to the non-dual realization of oneness with all life. So I guess it's just a matter, and Gary and I were talking about this before you guys came on. It's a matter of the label and how we respond to the label. I particularly, non-duality means, for me, it's not, it's not oneness for me. I mean, it's me hearing, and look, I'm not that evolved that I can, supersede all of those labels and just sit there and come to some kind of terms with it. For me, when I hear the word oneness, it's a pinpoint, it's a vision, it's something I can relate to. Non-duality, for all that it's worth, yes, I can understand the definition of it, but it doesn't really have the feel for me. So maybe that's my problem. Robert, how do you want to respond to what the AI bot?
Well, I'm being very impressed with AI, I have to say. I think AI sounds like a good buddy, a resource, a pal who can come up with interpretations of my own writing that I didn't think of. It's pretty impressive in that regard. But what it said there to me is that we are evolving creatures. We're evolving through the state of duality, then non-duality, and then oneness. And eventually we will be in that total state of oneness. But what and other of my guides have said is that oneness does not manifest. Oneness is a state of perfection toward which we evolve. If it were not perfection, there would be no need for us to evolve toward it. And we are not in that state of perfection yet. It's like the statement in the U.S. Constitution, we're moving toward a more perfect union, but we're not there yet. And to me, that's an important part of this conversation about duality, non-duality, and oneness, is that there's a dynamic movement from one to the other in both directions, really. So I'm anticipating, the use of our language here and our conversation here to bring out how we can use this, how can we apply this to our lives, and for the betterment of our communities and our brethren, sisterhood, whatever.
I mean, it is a tool for us to evolve to a better state of consciousness that we're in now. And everybody that is following the path of non-duality, I think I could be wrong. I mean, they've obviously evolved to a state of understanding it. I'm not sure how great a place they're actually living it, but that's not for me to say. That's for each individual, each dual individual, to find themselves in that place of non-duality. So,
Another thing that they say in the writings often, I mean, well, maybe not so often, but often enough for me to recognize it as a principle, is that individuality is an archetype. It's an archetype of oneness that we use as we use other archetypes in our lives and our state of evolution. So the concept of undividedness, which is what individual means, non-divided, that's a model. If we look deep, we can see below the idea of an individual, like an ego, there is a state of undivided nature, which is oneness. But you have to look deep.
Marianne, let's talk about the art therapy and non-duality in relation to art. You're both artists. You're a potter, Marianne. Robert's a writer and a documentary filmmaker. And that is a whole other realm of possibility where the creative energy flows through in such a non-dual way. It just, you are actually tools manifesting the creative force. So can you talk about your art therapy and how you feel about the non-duality in that?
Well, as an art therapist, I bypassed words and had patients work. For instance, I was working with women with eating disorders. So I would have them with clay sculpt their image of their bodies. And it was amazing how you would have them formulate the female body and press on the stomach, and press, or make the thighs huge because that's how they felt their thighs were. And so they were non-verbally expressing the feelings of themselves. I'm a little distracted because there's a word Robert said, which I want to pull out into the art, which is nature. And I think what we're trying to do with the art therapy and it's to find the true nature of the person. When I'm working with my own clay in my own studio, which I have for 50 years, I'm taking that clay, holding it, and listening to it. And it's drawing me to my own nature, the nature of Marianne, because sometimes I'm so surprised at what comes out. Whether it's a sculpture or on the potter's wheel over and over again, repetitively, meditatively, going into an altered state and seeing what comes out. I mean, that's my nature. And my clients in art therapy, I'm trying to help them express their nature. I don't know if that answers the question, but I just needed to bring out that word, the nature, our nature. Gary,
it seems that both you and Robert have come to the same place then. I mean, Robert's expression through the writings is, I don't know if you want to go with a stream of consciousness of some other being or some other voice, how you want to express that. But you're both doing the same thing. You're allowing that creative force to just work through you without using your mind to contextualize it, right?
Yeah, get it out of the way.
Well, it raises a paradox to me. And let's just use the two of us as an example. We are two individuals, and yet we believe in oneness. We believe we're representing nature and the nature of oneness, and yet we do it in distinct ways. And so the paradox to me is that we can have duality and non-duality on the same stage. And that seems to me to be part of nature.
You're talking about individuality as,
I know I'm talking about the fact that we're both pursuing our own art forms, let's say, and
right,
coming up with different conclusions. I mean, I don't produce pottery, but you do. You don't write, but I do. And so you can say that we are representing the oneness. We do participate in whatever degree of non-duality we can, but still there's a paradox here. And a paradox represents, dare I say it, duality.
so maybe I don't see the paradox. We're both creating from our own nature to add to the
The
oneness.
paradox I see is that we are one, and yet we produce two different manifestations, two creations.
Okay. I need to hear what Gary's thinking.
I'm with Marianne again. I don't see the paradox at all. In the oneness, duality appears. It's expressed. Robert is expressing his nature. Marianne's expressing her nature in the context of the oneness. I don't see a paradox there at all.
So you're saying that basically oneness or non-duality is context. That equals context.
Context,
Yeah.
not content.
No,
Content.
no. I heard you. Yeah.
Okay. Context. Yes. Yes. Context.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting observation. I think that may well kind of frame our whole conversation, that we're talking about context in the one sense and content, as you wanted to point out, in the other sense.
Exactly.
Have we come to a crossroads here?
No, I think we came to an understanding.
I think
Well,
I think we came to an understanding, right? It's not a crossroads, it's an understanding.
Right, but okay. A crossroads is not necessarily dual. It could be non-dual. I mean,
No, I think that's a valuable a valuable point, Stefan, that it could be dual. It doesn't have to be. It's a crossroads is a cross, right?
right.
It's two things coming together like that. Well, the togetherness represents the non-duality, but the coming part could represent duality,
Right.
like from different directions, north, south. But from a non-dual perspective, I'm not sure that you're allowed to use words like north, south, yin, yang, up, down, right, wrong. So I'm confused about the dogma of non-duality.
Well, I just
Okay.
want to jump in and say non-duality is non-dogmatic. And yes,
Okay.
everything is allowed. There's the capacity for everything to appear, as we alluded to before. Like, hey, you can get angry. That doesn't mean you've lost your non-duality. This is just an idea that non-duality or anything or reality should be this way and not this. Whereas from the non-dual point of view, it's open. It's the capacity, as one teacher puts it, it's the capacity for everything to appear. And then what you do with that, okay, that's up to the individual actors, whatever role they happen to be playing. But yeah, no, it's allowed, and east and west is allowed, north and south, good and bad, it's all allowed. But I would say it's seen through as being impermanent, coming and going. One day this way, it's seen through. So therefore, the sense or the realization of the underlying context of oneness is not lost.
Right.
That's the way I would say it.
The context, as we were saying before.
The context, yes, the context.
In our development, we're just not there yet. I think we're talking into the future of where we'd like humanity to move to, but we have a long way to go. We're very unevolved.
I would certainly agree with that, but I think I want to play with words a little bit here. When Gary says context, I think of the ego wanting to have a contest, T-E-S-T. So that's where duality erupts and tries to jimmy the system.
Well, that's where artificial intelligence, when it responded to my comment, responded to my comment on patriarchy, that duality felt like it had a patriarchal undertone to me. And AI came back and said that, yes, there is this divisiveness in sports, in dealing with money, and, you know, the things that I had listed.
The patriarchy is the is the dualistic one. The matriarchy, that's the non-dual one. And that's why many teachers say it's time now for a you know, like a paradigm shift or whatever they want to call it, from the patriarchal model to the matriarchal model, where the all-embracing, all-loving matriarchal model versus the let's duke it out, you know, patriarchal model.
Yeah.
That to me makes a lot of sense anyway.
Yeah, to me, that's more the circle than the left, right. You know, it's more encompassing. But the loving that you said, I hope that the loving model, the patriarchy will learn the loving model within itself, because we don't want the feminine to look like the only caretaking. I mean, this is where it has to come closer together to oneness. That men cross over into caretaking, women cross over into money. I mean, it all becomes better for all humanity.
I think you're totally right. That would be ideal. Yeah, we're not trying to knock out the patriarchy, right? But to enlighten it, or have it enlighten itself, or whatever. To
Right.
just whatever what you're saying. Yeah, totally resonates.
Just to further kind of, I'm sure this might muddy the water, but what the heck?
Go for it.
How do you define duality, Gary?
Well, duality. Well, you know what? I thought that little introduction that Stefan did with was it AI and 500. I thought that was great. So let me just go back to it. So non-duality, and I'm reading from the thing. Non-duality refers to the idea that there is no separation between the individual self and the universe. Okay, so well, duality is the opposite of that. Yes, there is a division. I'm here and you're there, and this, and yeah, and let's you know, or I'm here and the world is out there, and I now have to negotiate and figure out how to protect myself and do all things. So that's duality. Whereas the non-duality is like, no, there's only the ocean. I'm a wave, you're a wave, everybody's a wave, but in reality, there's just the ocean.
I'm waving.
Yeah, I thought that thing was very good. When it said yes. Letters from 500 by Robert Potter shares themes that closely align with the concept of non-duality, even if it doesn't use the term explicitly. We don't have to use the term. We don't have to use any terms. We use the terms that, you know, like Stefan was saying before. Non-duality doesn't resonate with him, but oneness does. Well, it's the same thing, but we resonate with one, you know, flavor versus another flavor. So that's perfectly fine. We don't have to use the word non-duality at all. It doesn't have to come up in the conversation to talk about or to get at what we're talking about, which is, and Marianne said it, you know, one's nature or one's real nature. That's the whole thing is about. Once I would say, once we come to a realization of our own real nature, then that, you know, then that kind of loosens everything up, and, you know, the ego doesn't come in to the extent that it normally does. And, you know, and eventually I would say it would just kind of dissolve or drop away, or just not be an effective player. There's Robert.
My computer just stopped working.
Now that's oneness. That's oneness. They're together. No more split screen. No more two chairs.
I just teleported. We were on other sides of the planet, and here I am.
We're one.
Robert, you evolved.
So here's my question. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Everybody talks about how they've evolved to this state, you know, and that's all well and good. But I've yet to see anybody that's really touched that space. Now, I haven't seen a lot of people, I guess, in my yoga journey, but all these people that are talking about living in a state of non-duality, I think you're working on it. I mean, that's my own opinion, okay? Mm-hmm. If you think that you're there and you've reached that high state, I mean, I watched Adyashanti, and he seems to be just in a beautiful state of being. I've watched Eckhart Tolle. He seems to be in a beautiful state of being. But then there are others pronouncing out there, that are living in the state of non-duality. Like Marianne said, we are still trying to evolve to that state of perfection. And I guess if you want to say we're as perfect as we could be at this point, fine. I go along with that. But don't pretend to be something we aren't yet just because of the label.
I agree. Totally.
Well, Baba Ram Dass comes to mind because he was an advocate of non-duality, I believe, and he wanted it to be his whole reality. And yet somehow the universe said no to him. It kept providing him with situations where he couldn't achieve it. Now, I don't know if he ever talked about that, but I could observe it in the way his life manifested, especially the later years. And even in the movie Fierce Grace, when he had his stroke, he said, I thought I was so spiritually advanced, and all I could think of is my own survival in the end. So, but I point him out because he's an example to me of a lot of teachers who want oneness to exist. They want oneness in the world. They don't want this divisiveness and ego and hatred and fear, etc. They want something that's perfect. And Eckhart Tolle says, it ain't here. We're here to be challenged. Don't come here and expect to have perfection.
Finish, Robert. I'm sorry for you.
No, I'm just saying that's the paradox.
Okay. So with that Fierce Grace movie, there were two things that happened that were very poignant. One was the one you pointed out, that when he had his stroke, he was fine. He came off of the pedestal of the high yogi, and he was basically in a holy shit moment. I'm going to die. And the other thing that happened that really blew my mind is the letter he wrote to that couple whose daughter was unfortunately murdered in the announcer's booth of the football stadium of the high school.
That was one of the highest spiritual things I've ever seen in a movie. That, what you're talking about there.
Yes, well, that letter came from another space, another time, another state of perfection, and moved that couple to leave their sense of grief and move into a state of wonder. I mean, it was just such a beautiful moment. And that was the other side of that perfection.
I think you're right. I think he was demonstrating right there. On the one hand, the duality, on the other hand, the oneness. And what was so beautiful and sublime about witnessing his response to that couple and the woman who was in such grief at the end. I have never witnessed anything more spiritual than what he portrayed in the film at that point.
I'm glad you brought up that woman at the end. I'm sorry, because we'll go from here. But that woman at the end was given that field of love. She was experiencing love unconditionally, like she had never experienced any love before. And that was so powerful, that state of unconditional love. And there's no talk about love that I've heard yet in this conversation or in the conversations about non-duality. Is it just a throwaway? But for me, I think that I had a moment where I had definitely experienced that feeling of unconditional love. And I don't see it or hear it in the non-dual system. So
it's interesting. I was going to start saying we're talking so much with words, and we haven't gotten into the experiences that are needed in this lifetime to evolve, to move to a higher level of learning about your own nature. like experiences like grief. I mean, I was transformed 14 years ago when my husband of 44 years died in 8 minutes. Gone. Perfectly fine, gone. The shock of that, the follow-up, the deep grief, the transformation that was coming across to me, if I hadn't done a lot of preparation through my experiences of shamanism and sweat lodges and Peru and all the things that I've tried, if I hadn't had those experiences, I don't think I could have entered this space of grief with this reassurance that, wow, something unbelievably holy is happening here. Even though I'm suffering terribly, I'm having an experience and I'm going to get the meaning from this experience. I'm going to be open to whatever I'm supposed to learn through this. And stayed with that and changed me a lot and brought me to this point where I can hear these different things now. So I think the experiences, your experience, this woman's experience, Ram Dass, these experiences are what help us move toward evolving. You know, even the experience of therapy, if it's good therapy, it helps you evolve.
Nobody talks about evolution in that way. I mean, it's not really talked a lot about on the spiritual path that we are where we are now as humankind, and we are evolving to a higher state of being. And I think people think that within the place that we are now in evolution, that they've evolved to that higher state. And I think the journey has really just begun, you know, and there are all these light workers that have awakened on Earth, and they're sending their energy out to help enhance the planet's evolution and therefore the beings that live on the planet.
I hate to sound like I'm putting a plug in for my own work, but I have to reference the last book I wrote, the subtitle of which is Evolution. The Voice of the Silence, and the subtitle is Evolution. And it deals with exactly what we're talking about here. In fact, there's a chapter on love and how love and evolution work together.
We're going to put a link underneath this podcast to Letters from 500 page on Amazon. So if people are interested, they can go. All the books are listed there. You can start from evolution and work your way back, or start from Letters from 500 and evolve to evolution. We'll see what happens.
Okay,
So
I'm referring to the last three, though, The Voice of Silence.
Yes.
That's a different series.
Gary, you said you found that thing that AI had talked about. Can you?
No, I read it over and I thought it was, in other words, what the AI said was that the letters from 500 was very much in sync with, you know, the non-dual teachings, current non-dual teachings, and I read it through and yeah, it was. I totally resonated with that. Let me just read the conclusion here. Letters from 500 relates to non-duality by fostering a state of pure, non-judgmental awareness where the ego's tendency to divide and separate is transcended through noticing, right? Through noticing, being present with what is, I added those words, through noticing, one moves closer to the non-dual understanding that all of reality is interconnected, and the distinction between the observer and the observed dissolves, leaving only pure awareness or oneness. This is a key element of non-dual realization, experiencing life as a seamless whole, free from what? The illusion of separation. That little paragraph there sums up the entire, from my point of view, non-dual teaching. Somebody said to me, well, give me a paragraph explaining non-dual teachings. I would take that and say, here, it doesn't get any better than just that. Let me add something here, because what I'm hearing a lot and I want to push back at it. It's like a lot of talk about this person's experience, whether it's Ram Dass or Adyashanti, it doesn't matter who it is, Nisargadatta, Ramakrishna, Eckhart Tolle. A lot of talk about that. That's all speculation. We don't know what is internal to anybody. Yes, they can express it, and we can say, I kind of get them. But one thing about non-duality, which is crystal number one, is it's not about Eckhart Tolle's experience. It's not about Adyashanti's experience or Ram Dass. It's what is your experience? What is you look, that's why we do the thing with the headless way. We look, what's here, what's right now, what is the experience of that? Let's explore that. I don't know, I don't care about, I like Adyashanti and I like Eckhart Tolle, but I'm not caught up with their experience. I want to look at what's going on right here, right now. That to me is really where the rubber meets the road, not what somebody may be or somebody not doing. It just seems irrelevant to me. But in a certain way, in a certain context, yeah, you bring it in. Like I always like to quote Nisargadatta and Ramakrishna a little bit. But it's not. It's always about. It's only about one thing, the experience that's going on here, not somewhere else.
Absolutely. And you know what? We're going to put those paragraphs that you just read, along with others from the book, for people who are interested underneath the podcast. So you'll be able to see them as well as, listening to what we're saying, and read them for yourself and absorb them in a way that you feel you're resonating with them or not.
It's really good. It's really good. All that stuff, all that stuff that came out of that AI thing is really, really good. And look, let's just go over a few of them. The presence in the now, disidentification with thought, shifting from egoic awareness to pure awareness. I mean, this is all like right up the alley. Observing without judgment. I mean, all this stuff. This is what's important. If we stick with, and this is, I'm editorializing here. If we stick with this stuff, like let's say those 4 or 5 pointers, where they were, and look how is that showing up here, then I don't have to worry about how it's showing up for anybody else. I don't have to worry because I know what's true for me. And getting back to what Marianne was, what we talked about earlier, but discovering one's own nature, and Robert too, drilling down, what's there? True nature.
So I guess we're all artificially intelligent, because the artificial intelligence
alternately intelligent
works for me.
So it's drawing from everybody's. It's drawing from information that it's culling from all parts of the internet. And
Stefan, I have to interrupt you for a second because I don't want to lose this. I think you're rendering a great service here in portraying AI in such a spiritual way. You're giving a new look at AI that you don't hear people talk about. Everybody's afraid of AI. What's it mean for the future? You're showing it can be a really useful tool in a spiritual sense.
It enhances communication.
Yes, and that's exactly what happened with me, because like I've mentioned before in these podcasts, Gary's approach to this whole thing is very succinct. He's got, formed in his mind what he wants to ask, and there's clarity there. But for me, I'm kind of reaching for everything that's out there in cloud land, and trying to form sentences to be as clear as I possibly can. And because of that, I went on to the ChatGPT and posed questions of a spiritual nature to see what would happen. And it came up with things that are so clear for me that I definitely find it has enhanced my understanding. So,
and the gift of it was that it came from our own input to it, and it summed it up more succinctly for us and stayed with the spiritual perspective.
So it's representing the context of non-duality back to us, even though we, from our supposed separate perspectives, are addressing it. It's coming back with oneness.
It is. It's more enlightened than we are, that's for sure.
I think it is. It's sad to say, but yes.
God bless it.
Wait, does this mean we have a new guru, Stefan? No, please, let's not go down that road again. We've been there already. Forget about it. No more gurus. And that's another thing about non-duality. I just want to throw a quick plug in. It's non-hierarchical. There's nobody more non-dual than the next person because there's only this. So it's just different windows looking out of the same building. But no more gurus.
I hear you.
Well, you know what Ramana Maharshi said when disciples said, well, how can we help others? He said, there are no others. Bam. Full stop. That ended that conversation. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Right now at this moment, I feel full. I feel complete. We covered a lot of stuff. And I want to thank both Robert and Marianne, because you're together, but you have two different perspectives. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. I love that idea.
I feel like we covered what our goal was.
I think so. So.
Yeah, and I think the conclusion was what I was mentioning, that Stefan has turned a corner on AI, and maybe uniquely. I have not heard anybody else do this with AI, what you've done. And I think that's a very nice place to stop for the time being.
Perfect.
So we want to invite you back, though, man. Marianne.
We have another hour at least. So yeah, we'll definitely come back. And then and let's see how evolved we are when we come back. We know where we are now. Let's see how evolved we are in 2 weeks or 2 months.
Well, I'm about to take a 2-week journey to grandkids in Florida. So after that, I don't know if I'll be more or less evolved.
Well, you know what Ram Dass says? He says, if you think you're enlightened, spend 2 weeks with your grandkids.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, I'm going to come back completely spilled out.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Good way to end.
Well, we've got a big shift coming up in 2025, an election coming down the pike,
Yeah.
a big shift. So let's see how evolved we all are after this happens. And, we'll go to the next level of AI and talk about that. Thank you both very much. This was wonderful. I love you both,
Thank
Oh,
you.
really,
Thank you.
really
Love you.
great. Really great. Thank both of you. I mean, it was tremendous. I can't wait to watch it again. I'm going to get so much more out of it second time around. It's true. When I watch the videos again, I get so much more out of it.
Well, Gary, I got to compliment you too. I think you're doing a great thing here with this whole idea of the podcast and drawing Stefan into it.
No, it was Stefan's idea. He drew me.
Oh,
Really?
Yeah, it was his idea.
Stefan had a good idea? What?
the timing was just right for
Listen,
you.
Robert, I was surprised as you are.
Well, Stefan has moved to a higher state. It's called New
He
Hampshire.
has.
No, it's called Vermont, Robert. Don't confuse the two.
Oh, I'm
It's
sorry.
Vermont.
Your relatives are in New Hampshire. Vermont is a higher state. Absolutely.
All right, you guys.
Have a beautiful
Have
day.
a wonderful day. We'll talk real soon.
Great.
Okay, take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks again.
Thank you.
That was a great conversation, don't you think?
Yeah, it was great. I love the 4 different points of view. Not everybody kind of getting in lockstep. And I love the dynamic that Marianne and Robert have going on between them. It's really it's very interesting, and I think really it sheds light on a lot of stuff.
To your point, the idea that everybody's got their own point of view, their own way of seeking and finding is what makes it all so beautiful, because we're able to experience perceptually through our own, relationship with other people, their sense of duality or non-duality. And I think it adds to the conversation. And this is what we want, people to join us on this podcast. And, let us know if you're interested, if you have another point of view that you want to share. You can leave it in the comments underneath, or you can let us know. Maybe you want to come on to the podcast and join us for a conversation.
Yeah, we have a lot of, or I should say, several interesting people lined up, but we're lining up people all the time. So let us know. Who do we have coming up next?
Atta Latoy is coming on
Atta
next.
Latoy is coming up next. Now I know Atta Latoy has a very different point of view than probably any we've heard before on this show. She's going to be talking about animal spirits, communicating with nature, trees, rocks. So that's a whole different shtick than like we've been emphasizing non-duality, several of our guests, and then after that we've got some exciting people because there's such a great variety. William James wrote a book, right? The variety of religious. It's a classic. The variety of religious experience, like around 1902 or something. Okay, so what this is the variety of awakening experiences or the variety of enlightenment experiences, because it's not just one little thing like he showed in that book. The religious experiences is a vast array of points of view. So same thing here. So that's what we're getting at. So it's going to be interesting.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to put links underneath this podcast to Letters from 500, so people can see what the books are all about. There's also a meditation that Robert does. It's a beautiful meditation, taking you into the future. If you're interested, I'm going to put a link onto that. And I think it's time to say goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time with Atta Latoy. Great. Looking forward to it.
There you go.